Yeah, Pamana Tuan Sayoc said, if you start trying to solve the problem, you become part of the problem, and so that never ends well.
Hello, my name is Jamie Sparling. Welcome to the FormABLE Podcast, where we talk about formable moments in martial arts and formable moments in the lives of martial artists. Hit the like, subscribe, notification bell. You know the drill. Today, I have Guru Harley Elmore, Tuhon, actually. Guru Harley Elmore from Warriors Way Martial Arts. And he has been around the block, done a tremendous amount of different things, and we're so excited to have him on the show today. Hello, Guru. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my honor. It's my honor. I had a great conversation with Coach Chuck John Greco last year, and he
Yeah.
talked so highly about you that I went like down a 3 month rabbit hole every once in a while, looking you up on YouTube and all the different things that you do, and found your old Panantukan videos. I was like, ooh, save those. Yeah, it's great to have
Yeah.
you on the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We put out a lot of work, as you saw, many years ago. That's been many, many years ago now, but we haven't been doing that as much lately. But I think it's really when we were getting Warriors Way International kind of up and running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I mean, those Panantukan videos might have even been like DVDs at one time. I'm still a DVD guy. I have hard copies. And people freak out about that. They're like, "Oh, whatever." It's like, "Well, if I loan it to you, I have to write your name down. I have to make sure I get it back." Well, can't you just email it to me? No, you go on the list.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a hard drive guy too. I mean, I have Inosanto VHS tapes from back in the 80s, from seminars that, we hosted and things like that. So back when you could videotape, a Guru Dan seminar.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I have a VCR tape of Guru Dan's that's up in my office. And just recently, and I'll never forget, I asked him to sign it. And he signed, I gave him the videotape to sign. And he looked at me and he goes, "You want me to sign the videotape?" And I didn't know up until about 2 years ago that there was a little area where I could have taken out the picture and had him sign. I had no idea, but the look on his face was like, this is a first one, but I just was not aware, was not aware. Uh,
Yeah.
Tuhan, could you tell us a little bit about your backstory and like what pulled you into martial arts? And more importantly, like, is there something that made you stay when it got difficult? Because it always gets somewhat difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Arkansas, in rural Arkansas, at the end of a long dirt road. And um, my early childhood was pretty good. And then my family kind of, mom and dad started having some problems. My dad was an alcoholic and became abusive, and to my mom and to me and my brother. And I felt like it was my job to defend them
Hmm.
and stand up to them. And of course, I'm a tiny little kid at that time.
Hmm.
But as I saw martial arts movies, and I can remember particularly Bruce Lee movies, um, that they Bruce used the martial arts to defend the weak and the innocent, and
Yes.
and the oppressed, and so I knew that was a way to do that. I knew, I really believed that martial arts would give me the capability to be able to stand up for myself and people that I loved, and so that was the start of that. I didn't get it right then, but as I got closer to martial arts, I knew that's what I was looking for.
Hmm.
And so, in my very early teens, I was lucky enough to get to train with someone who was extremely good, um, and that was he at the time, he was the reigning PKA world champion, and so lots and lots of calisthenics and lots of sparring with sweaty boxing gloves, big, heavy, sweaty boxing.
Yeah.
And there was some kids in class and some adults in class, but the kids didn't last. So it very quickly ended up being one of the few kids in the adult class, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So, but that was my reason, I guess, for getting into martial arts. And yeah, martial arts were hard. They were hard then. But my life was hard, right? So
Sure.
like I said, I lived about 5 miles outside of town. The town was population of 1,000 people, rural Arkansas, and then I lived 5 miles out on a dirt road from that. And I was having to walk to town, or if I had the gas or my moped was working, ride my little moped to town, and just to go to class, and then work and do the things to be able to earn money to be able to pay my classes, and so that was much harder than class, right?
Yeah.
Just getting there, coming up with my $20 a month, hauling hay or whatever it was, working in chicken houses, whatever I was doing at the time to make my money. So martial arts training was easy compared to those things. In fact, it was my relief, right? It was my happy place, if you will. I know it's a term people use now. It was the place where I had positive role models. Even when things were hard, I saw progress. I got introduced to a whole different world besides the world I was living in, which was looking less and less, positive. And so it's what kept me through my teenage years. By the time I was 16, I lived by myself in a house in the woods with no electricity and no running water. And again, having a couple part-time jobs after school and on weekends to be able to make some money, to be able to put gas in my tank for my motorcycle and be able to drive to martial arts class, and maybe get a little bit of food here and there. And so that was hard.
Yeah.
Martial arts was the release. Martial arts was the great thing for me.
I can totally relate to that. I grew up similar.
Yeah.
Not exactly, as far outside of town and whatnot, but my father was also struggled with alcoholism. There was a lot of violence in the house, and
Yeah.
a lot of fear,
Yeah.
and watching those shows like Kung Fu and
Yeah.
all those old shows was like, that could be the path. That could be the
Yeah.
path to something, stand up for myself and others.
Yeah. And it's at first I didn't talk about it. People would be like, "Hey, why did you get into martial arts?" And I would tell them the story about, "Oh, I love martial arts, Bruce Lee, all that stuff," which is all true. But I realized that there's more and more people out there like me. And although it's a little bit embarrassing in the beginning to talk about, the more I talked about it, the more I realized a lot of people got started in martial arts because of these kinds of circumstances. And if we don't talk about them, then everybody keeps hiding it, right? So you just got to bring it out and tell the truth. And I did wait until my mom and my dad had both passed before I started talking about that sort of thing. But I'm sure my brothers don't enjoy hearing that, and my aunts and uncles. But they saw it. They know what's up.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment when martial arts switched from a hobby or path to an encompassing lifestyle for you,
Oh, um,
or was it gradual?
no, well, I will say that it became my identity pretty early,
Hmm.
um, because I was the guy who was doing martial arts, right? And when I talked to people that weren't normally in my circle of friends, which was very small, um, they'd be like, "Oh, you're still doing that karate?" And they were all surprised. I was kind of known as that guy, um, and I didn't have any other identity, so I was happy to accept that one. Um, and so I'd say probably getting ready for my first black belt um, was probably it. It was probably when I was like not doing anything else. I mean, I wasn't dating girls. I wasn't. I was working because I still had to feed myself and put myself through high school. But I was training on the heavy bag during the summer. I would train on the heavy bag all night because it was too hot during the day. With no air conditioning. And so I would do heavy bag work all night. And then when it started to get daylight, I would sleep during the hot part of the day. But so that was all I was doing, like literally. So that became a huge part of my identity. And I did jobs because I had to, but
Yeah.
I was a martial artist. Yeah. I was going to say, and then when Mr. Gibson and Mr. Gibson hired me at Gibson's Martial Arts. That was it, man. That was my shot. And it's like getting your shot and getting accepted in the major leagues. This is it, and I wasn't going to mess that up. And that's when it went from being doing martial arts to prove everybody else wrong, right?
Yeah.
To prove my dad wrong and all the naysayers. But it switched to doing martial arts because I loved martial arts, and all that pressure was gone. All that need to prove other people wrong, and to prove myself worthy and all that stuff. That was all gone, and I started training with people that I really loved. And I did love the other guys, but I was taking a lot of hate out on them at the time. 16-year-old Harley was a handful, and but by the time I got the job at Gibson's, I'd worked through all that, and I was in a very nurturing environment with people who really cared about me, and I was doing stuff that blew me away every single day, and that's where I got to really build relationships with guys like Guru Dan, of course, and Pa Herman and Ajahn Chai, and all the guys,
All the greats. All the
Yeah.
greats. Could you tell us a little bit about Guru Terry Gibson? When I had sent you a message, I had let you know that somebody told me that I needed to pick up his Sealot DVD set, and
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know that much about him, but I knew that he was high up in the Inosanto family, and the DVD set was really good, and I just want to hear a little bit about what it was like to train with him.
Yeah, Terry, what was in this part of the country, there wasn't many people certified, and so if you were going to get certified in the South, you had to get under Guru Dan. You had to get Terry Gibson's nod, and if you didn't get it, you didn't get promoted. And if you wanted to test in Thai boxing under Master Chai, anywhere in the South, you had to get Terry Gibson's nod. And so he ran this whole part of the country for those two gentlemen. He was a full instructor. He's one of the first full instructors outside the academy. And when Guru Dan created Mafalindo Silat, he was one of the first 7. Well, he immediately promoted 7 people in Mafalindo Silat outside the academy, and 3 of them were from our academy. It was Terry Gibson, Kathy Gibson, and a guy named Eric Jensen, who's no longer with us. Terry was up there. He was extremely skilled, extremely knowledgeable, took it very seriously to be that. He was a natural athlete. I gave him a hard time with him. Like, I've never seen you lift weights. And how do you have forearms and arms and shoulders and, how do you do all that? Did you do it all growing up? He's like, it's just genetics, man. I wish I could take credit for it. And I didn't believe him until I met his brother, who's a professional artist, and his brother's got even bigger forearms than he did. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. He's like, I told you, genetics, man. But he did take his training very seriously. He had been an attorney, and after a brain tumor, he decided that he didn't want to do that for a living for the rest of his life. He did oil and gas contracts in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he just was not satisfied with that, stuck in an office poring over the tedious paperwork. And he was like, I want to do martial arts for a living. And after the brain tumor, he was like, yeah, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. Because after the tumor, he had seizures. And every seizure, they told him every seizure could leave you in as a vegetative state, or it could just kill you outright. So every seizure was, frightening. And so he decided, well, I'm not doing that. And so started this martial arts school full time, and that changed his whole course.
Yeah, sounds like it
Yeah.
changed yours too. One of the
It
things
did.
that you had brought up was it was like a nurturing academy, and that you made like real relationships there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget the first time that he shook my hand and gave me a hug. Because Terry did that with his core guys, and when he did that with me, I was like, oh man, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm one of the guys now, and I'd just driven up for a seminar to train with Mark McFan, actually, and afterwards he shook my hand and gave me a hug and said goodbyes, and And I hadn't really experienced that from any other male role model in my life.
Mhm.
And now, don't get me wrong, Terry was a very harsh taskmaster. Um, being in that position that he was, I watched him turn down promotions. Guru Dan would be like, I want to promote this guy and this and that. And Terry would be like, nope. He's like, but he's really good. I'm like, yeah. And Terry would say, no, he's not training hard enough. He hardly ever shows up. He's just not doing the work behind the scenes to earn that promotion. And so he took it very seriously, that position. And I try and replicate that as much as I can to be a solid gatekeeper. I learned that from him, that idea, and holding people to standards and all that stuff. But at the same time, having a real relationship. He knew people's wives' names, and he knew what they did for a living. He would know how many kids they had. I mean, he just genuinely liked being around the people in his class. And in the old days, weekend flag football was not uncommon. Everybody would do Saturday class, or he'd say, hey, no class this weekend. We're going to go play flag football in the park, and everybody go play flag football or something like that. So yeah, he had a very good, sense of camaraderie.
How did he build that camaraderie with his students? And you already explained a little bit, but how also did that carry over to you, and how you build that in your organization?
Well, I think first off, Terry's academy was smaller than mine,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So in numbers,
for sure.
and so yeah, he only had so many years to build it, right, and before he passed. Um, so, but I think he just organically enjoyed talking to people and getting to know them and asking questions about them. He had a pretty open door policy in that he was willing to talk to people anytime. And I watched him help, instructors and apprentices and just regular students with issues that, they wanted to talk to Sifu about. Um, and I just watched all that. I was really kind of in the backgrounds of the whole thing, just watching how he and Kathy ran things. And I was a kid, man. I turned 21 in that academy. So I was a kid. And so I was really learning. And this was my first time to live in a big city, and things like that. There was I was very, very naive to the world. And Terry and Kathy would commonly pull pranks on me and joke with me about stuff because I was just some dumb hick from the woods, and I fell for every joke and gag and, all the things. Um, but he was very good at that, making people feel welcome and feel loved, honestly. And then when I came here, my goal in starting Warriors Way was to recreate exactly what we had in Tulsa, here in Wichita Falls. The city didn't necessarily want that; they wanted a little something different, but I still wanted that sense of camaraderie. And over the last 26 years, almost 27 years, I have codified that into a system of how we do that, and um, and that's what Guru Chuck talked a little bit about some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody interviewed one of my top guys, a guy named Brandon Bennett, who's an Ajahn under Master Chai, and he is my right hand man. I have two top guys in Warriors Way International. One is Brandon Bennett, one is Chad Silvis, and so they help me run Warriors Way International. And so somebody did it. Oh, it was Dwight Woods. Dwight Woods did an interview, and all he wanted to talk about was how we create that tribe mentality in Warriors Way. But it's just something that I think you have to do, and it has to be a conscious effort if that's what you really want. You can't hope that your people are tight. You can't hope that they're all moving all in the same direction. You can't hope that there's not some cancer growing in your organization. Those are things that you have to consciously work on all the time. And if you want longevity, and if you want, a real strong, close group that really care about each other, which we have.
When we train hard and there's like a threat of injury and things can happen like that, it's fascinating how people get really close. It's almost exactly opposite of what like the general public would see. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. So Well, people who go through hardship together grow closer. That's
Hmm.
exactly right. That's why in military you have brothers in arms, right? Because guys who have been in the foxhole together will be closer to them. They'll be closer to them than anybody else in the world, even their wives, right, and children. I mean, those are very real things that when people are going through extreme hardship together, and it's something that I've really try and foster because um, if you have an organization, people are going through some of the hardest times of their life right now in your organization,
Yes.
right now. And on the other side of that, somebody's celebrating the most joyous moments of their life right now. And so every time we get together, I point that out. Hey, I know for some of you, it was extremely hard to be here today. Um, but you're not alone. Other people are feeling exactly the same way because being the center point, I'm getting a lot of that from different people,
Hmm.
and I'm helping them, coaching them through that those difficult times and celebrating those great times. But they don't know that about each other. So when we bring them together, I got to remind everybody, hey, I know you're all having a hard time. Some of you are going through the hardest time of your life. There are other people here doing that too, and I'm glad you're here. And a big part of that is because I really do believe that through training, we grow stronger, right? We build, for lack of better term, internal muscles like endurance, emotional control, courage, those kinds of things. Um, they're muscles and they have to be strengthened through repetition. And so as we uh, as we go through those things, it's important that we kind of do them together to some degree.
Sounds like you're creating a family.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that what they say, but blood's thicker than water, that kind of thing. And really, yeah, I'm sure you know the whole quote on that, but um, I really do believe that you can create family, not just the family you're born with, but you can create family. And of course, I love the family I was born with, but again, some of the hardships, that'll never be replaced. But I also have other family that I have over the last, some of them. I mean, Brandon Bennett and I have been training together since 1990 or 91. So, I mean, uh, Chad has been with me for 26 years.
Wow.
Um, Chuck's been with me for 27 years, Guru Chuck. So you're talking about guys who have been with me longer than, you know, more than half their lives or, that kind of thing. So when you go through things together, you do become family. I mean, I always ask. I was just talking to Chuck, and I always ask, "How's mom's doing?" And how's his family? How are the kids? We talk forever about the kids and what they're going through and what they're doing, and how amazing that is. And of course, he asked me about my grandkids, and those are real things that you know. It's far more important than how his Puder Kapala looks.
Yeah, for sure. And when I had reached out to you, I was long, lengthy message, and I showed you a picture of my first teacher, Steve.
Yeah, yeah,
And Steve was like that for me.
yeah.
And that is one of those things that I try to do with my students to the best of my ability and get to know them and be accessible and know what's going on in their life to the best of my ability, um,
Right,
without taking it all on,
right,
because
right.
sometimes that can happen too.
Yeah, Pamana Tuhon Sayoc said, if you start trying to solve the problem, you become part of the problem.
Mm,
So, um, and so that never ends well, right? Um, and so, even though you have great intentions, so you have to be able to help people and be there for people and guide people without interjecting yourself into the circumstance, because then you just become part of the problem, and
yeah.
that's when you start carrying a lot of weight. Um, so, and of course, you can't do that.
That's got to be a hard lesson to learn because at the same time, at least for myself, I struggle. Like, I want to jump right in and, I think I know what you ought to do. And then I was told early when I went to college, I went to school for a counseling degree. I was told, well, my job is to listen and to figure out the answer they can live with because I don't have to live with the tail end of it. And
Yeah,
that hit me really like, oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's an enormous amount of tools that we use and that we use in Sayoc and that we use in Warriors Way International. But I would say that a simple way to look at that, which I have learned from my partner, Dr. Keith Wagner, who was a counselor, a psychologist, and he was a life coach for Tony Robbins for many years. And now he has his own practice and his own life coaching program. And I'd say that in general, most people already know the answers. You just got to lead them to that. You just got to ask the right questions. They'll come up with the answers. Now, whether they want to act on that or not, that's on them. But most people probably, if you get them to boil down, because everybody wants to talk about all the other stuff going on, but if you can ask good questions that lead them right, then you'll lead them to the answers, and that's really all you can do. It's on them to be able to, the action phase is on them. You can
Yeah.
have accountability. You can have accountability. You can ask them how that's coming, that sort of stuff. Um, and really, it's really interesting. We're kind of getting off into a different realm of what we do, but every martial arts instructor is to some degree doing this, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
If they're worth their salt, right? If they're worth much. I mean, if they're just a cheerleader, good job, and you come in and you get sweaty and you leave. Well, that's good. But that's not really. There's no depth to that, and certainly no longevity. In my opinion, this is why martial arts ranks should have time and grade, because you can get young studs who come in. I say young. You can get studs who come in with the right mental attitude. They have maybe a history of violence. They're not afraid of it. Maybe even they're addicted to it, and they're athletic, and they'll come in and they'll learn the techniques and they'll fight hard and they'll become a problem pretty quickly. And if they're good at mimicking, they'll be able to replicate the material fairly quickly. And we've all had those kind of super talented young students, and they can but the rest of their life is just terrible, right?
Yeah.
And but what'll happen is they'll put that back, or they'll hide those problems long enough, or they'll put them off the table for a while long enough to get some real rank in your academy. And then you make them an instructor, and then their life blows up, right? Because all the things they've been putting off all this time finally blow up in their face. And so I think that your standards for instructor should take longer than someone can fake it, right? They should have to deal with those problems in their life along the way through the lessons they're learning. And if they try and do that and just put things off and ignore it, and then it blows up, at least they didn't blow up in your instructor cadre, right? In your instructor staff.
Yes.
But if it takes so long that it takes them a long time, they have to. It takes years, not months, right? Well, now you're talking about somebody who can't put it off that long. They can't fake that long. They can't all the things. They have to really get their stuff together, get their ducks in a row, be a good human, be able to manage themselves, their emotions, their life, make good choices. And by the time they figured out how to do that, that's really around the time they should be getting ready for instruction, in my opinion.
I think that's a great opinion. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to my next question, and I apologize. I think you're fascinating, and you got a lot of great things to say. So we went off a crazy train a little bit there on some emotional
Yeah.
psychology stuff. Uh, what,
Yeah.
Tuhon, what do you look for in your students and in your instructors? And the reason I ask is that when I became an instructor with Guru Dan, I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it. I've made it. This is it, and then later I found myself thinking like, I don't know how I ended up here. Right. I mean, literally, a guy like me with my background, I don't know. I have no idea. And then I heard Rick Fay say one time that someone asked at MKG, Guru Dan in front of the seminar, uh, what he looked for in his instructors. And Guru Rick said that without taking or skipping a beat, Guru Dan went that they care about their students. And then he just moved on. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, oh, maybe I do belong here, you know?
Yeah.
And so, in the midst of all for yourself over the years, what do you look for in your students and the instructors that are going to be representing you or representing the arts?
That they care about their students.
Amen, sir. Amen.
I mean, yeah, of course, it's hard to beat Guru Dan in
Yes, sir.
his. I mean, he's been doing this longer than twice my lifetime at this point, and so what I would say is that in students, I tell my students I want three things from them. I want them to show up, I want them to do what they're told, and I want them to sweat. So show up, work hard, sweat, and follow instructions. If you do that, I'll make you amazing. That's actually pretty easy.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and um, and that doesn't require a lot on my part or their part. If you have a good curriculum and a good training program, which we do because we have great arts and they come with all that stuff, as long as you don't mess it up yourself,
Hmm.
um, then you can produce great results. And so then after that, it really becomes character, right? Who are you? What do you like? And so I don't really have anybody in my program that's bullies, that are bullies, that bully people, that beat on people when they don't need beaten on.
Hmm.
That everybody in my organization um, can go work with a brand new person and help make them better, and then turn around and work with a peer where they push each other, and then
Yeah.
turn around and work with a senior and be an honest, open book and be eager to learn. Those are all things that I demand from all of my staff and all of my instructors in my organization. But they're all such great character, and we foster that in our training models, so that's what people are. They just know this is the norm. And when somebody comes in and they're different than that, they are the anomaly. And when they recognize that type of behavior doesn't go well, they generally go away. Yeah.
So, uh, quick question. How do you think martial artists should think about violence realistically without becoming fearful or aggressive or a bully?
Yeah. Well, um, a bully is just someone who is. I think fighting is a power, uh, and it can be abused just like any other power, right? So
Hmm.
Um, and so, whether it's somebody who's slapping around on their wife or slapping around on kids or slapping around on some other student in your class that can't stand up for themselves or belittling people, there's a lot of
Hmm.
forms of that. Those are all abuses of power. And so, I mean, like I said, we don't tolerate any of that stuff. But how can martial artists do that? Well, I think that in general, most martial artists are not studying martial arts with the intent of violence. I think that there are guys who are studying martial art with and I'm talking about real violence, right? I'm not talking about um,
Competition.
yeah, nothing that has rules, right?
Sir.
So, I mean, those are all training models to get you ready for real violence, right? So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that because everybody goes, oh yeah, but people think that if you fight in the ring, whatever that ring is, right? That's going to make you more capable of violence. But um, that's just a starting ground. Like everyone should be there.
Hmm.
Everyone should go through that. Everyone should do hard competitive sparring with people outside your circle. At the very least, people inside your circle, to whatever your level of comfort is. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, it
And
makes
some
total sense.
Yeah, some people their threshold for violence is very low. They have no history of it. They don't have the athleticism for it. They don't have the personality for it. So they're going to get maybe all they want just by sparring the guys in class. And
Hmm.
other guys will need to go outside to find more pressures, right? Go outside the house, so to speak. And I know all of that's absolutely relevant. But there are real problems in the world that simply are not addressed by your martial arts training, right?
Yeah.
So I would advise that most martial artists need to look at violence in just take martial arts out of the way. Just pretend there's no such thing, and then just go study 1,000 hours of violence on video. You I mean, I can't tell you how much of that I have watched over the last 26 years back when we were sharing videos, because the internet wasn't what it is now. So we were getting a video clip and sending an email to a whole bunch of guys, and everybody's writing down what they thought and then forwarding the email to everybody else on the chain. And we had, tier 1 operators, and we had SWAT teams and snipers and EOD guys and, undercover cops and street brawlers and, bouncers. Everybody would chime in on their little email and send it back. And so you learned from all these different amazing perspectives. Some of them were martial artists, but a whole bunch of them were not. And so you got a chance to see, oh, wow, I would have never thought that. It made me extremely afraid of people who deal with explosives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good day. But so when you're looking at violence, I would say get rid of the filter of whatever it is that you do, because we have a tendency to look at, if I'm a Muay Thai guy, we have a tendency to look at street fights as a Muay Thai guy. And if we're jiu-jitsu guys, we have a look at. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve a problem through our filter, right? And some problems simply cannot be solved like that. So when you realize that the majority of violence is done, it's a little bit like we teach women self-defense courses, right? But then you start really digging into the stats, and you go, oh man, most women are assaulted and murdered by significant others, right? Boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, husbands, ex-husbands, someone they know. Statistically, that's the truth of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so now you go, wait a minute, my self-defense course doesn't answer any of that, right? How do I do that, right? I'm teaching her to look for known trouble areas and not walk in by the dumpster, and watch out for vans and parking lots. And yeah, that does happen, but statistically, that's incredibly low compared to, realistically, the guy who's going to assault your daughter in some way is her boyfriend. How do you prepare your daughter for that? It's not in your women's self-defense course, I bet.
Absolutely. In their own home.
Yeah, in their own home. Indeed. So you've done your stats. And same thing when it comes to children. You talk about, stranger danger, and, how to stay away from people and not talk to strangers and don't take candy and, blah, blah, blah. And then we look at the stats, and the people who are assaulting children are generally family members or close friends to families. Well, how are you teaching your kid about that? It's not covered in your stranger danger program.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to take your martial art, which may be centuries old, and you want it to be modern, application in modern times, you have to look at what the threats are that we are facing right now. What are the bad guys? Who are they really? And what are their attack methods, right? And then when you see that, then you can start building training models, education, awareness of those attacks and those attackers, and then training models to avoid that, to deter it, or mitigate it. And then if you have no other alternative, how to deal with it. And that's just an area that most martial artists are not really diving into,
When you
Go ahead.
When you say training models, do you mean like a scenario-based training? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot, right? Or maybe small incremental scenarios that build things.
Yeah. So, like I said, first you got to find out who the bad guys are. Then you
Yes,
got to
sir.
find out what their tactics are and how to avoid those things. And then, okay, well, once my foot goes into this trap, now what am I most likely to incur? And so now I need to build skill sets there, and then I need to test those. I need to pressure test those. And one of the ways we pressure test those are through what you would call scenarios. And in Sayoc Kali, we call them situations, because a situation is still inside of a box. A scenario is so open-ended that if they're really good, they'll completely avoid your scenario altogether. And you go, well, great job. We didn't test your skill set, but good job avoiding the problem. And I've had that happen in scenarios, and like, man, that girl walked in and went, nope, and turned around and walked right back out of my scenario. I'm like, good job. I mean, I didn't get to see how good you were going to be, but
Yeah.
so we boil that down. We break it down to situations, and situations are, here's the situation. You're here, there's there. It's a very time compressed thing. And I'm really boxing you to a if this, then that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm letting you have a little decision tree, but I'm really forcing you to do something. And if I went one step bigger, you might choose a different route. That would be outside of what I'm testing. So I need to know exactly what I'm testing, and I make my situations force you into one of those choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have bigger open-ended scenarios, and even those, you have to have a cap on that as well. We did a lot of this with Sayoc Tactical Group back during the global war on terror, and basically everything ended up with that. So you'd be training for a week or two, and then you'd have 2 or 3 days of just situational training and pressure testing what you just worked on, and see if they could really do it, and then take it out in the world. So after I did that for 20 years, I came home and said, okay, well, how can I do that with my martial arts academy? So we built a whole bunch of scenarios and situations, and built those things up, and we still do them on a regular basis. I cycle through them. You can't do them all the time. It's a little emotional for people. It's very physically challenging for some, um, and um, and for a lot of people, it's a little too real. So you have to cycle through a few of them, and then let them have some time off. And then maybe in a couple of years, I'll come back and I look and see where we're at. And then I want to test those skill sets. I'll push it into a scenario. We'll do a scenario or two, and then I'll go back and we'll build the skill sets based on what I saw in this. Because situational training is good for the coaches too, right? So I'm looking to see how well did my student body do with this situation, and like, okay, well, everybody's ready to put hands on, but 30% of the people didn't draw their pistol, even though we're at pistol range. They ran across the room and engaged in a physical altercation. Where they could have just stood up and handled it with another tool, or in this range, they went for that tool and they should have been throwing some elbows, because of the range, right? So, in some situations, you find that people go really big. They go to the biggest, most lethal option they can, and maybe that situation didn't dictate that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the inability to read the circumstance, read the situation, and make an appropriate use of force choice, or vice versa. So they shoot people who don't need to get shot, or they don't shoot people who should have gotten shot. So, but this is how we test all that, is through those kinds of scenarios and situations. Yeah.
That's great. I'd love to at some point come and study with you and see some of the scenario or the situations, because that part fascinates me. Growing up in a home where there was a threat of violence at real violence still scares me. I got to be
Yeah.
100% honest that it still does. And martial art doesn't really scare me, right?
Right.
Doing wrestling and doing jujitsu, right, helps me calm myself, so violence doesn't scare me maybe as much, but it
Right.
still does. And I'm
Sure.
fascinated to see how people lead others through that growth period, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I uh, I have a young man who went through his first scenario, and at the end of it, he was like overwhelmed, shaking, and he got it together, but he was really on the edge. And then and I talked to him now years later, and he's like, "Man, think back about what I was going through and how overwhelming it seemed. And now when I think about it, I realize how nice they were to me. They took me down gently. They didn't slam me. They took me down gently. They took my glasses off my face so that I wouldn't break my glasses, and moved them over out of the way. And the role players they're doing their job, of making sure you don't hurt them or get hurt yourself. But to him, he felt like he was in the fight for his life. So if you do it well, that's how it's supposed to work, right? Um, but you're absolutely right, and I will say, I I was in fourth grade the first time a guy pulled a knife on me.
Mm.
So, and I fought all the time. So, to me, in my early training, my martial arts training was that I was still doing that. My mentality was still that. I was still really trying to hurt the people I was sparring, and I did, unfortunately. Um, but I think it was about 16, 17 when the first time I put a guy in the hospital,
Mm.
in sparring in class, right? And so, yeah. it wasn't until later that at Gibson's that I was able to spar without that intent, right, of trying to hurt people. So I wasn't really afraid of that. And then I after Mr. Gibson passed, I bounced for uh, about 3 years. I was a bouncer, and so I was in uh, about 300 fights during that time, a little over 300. And I know that because in that bar, you had to write down every time you got in a fight and put your hands on people, and cops were called and all that stuff. You had to write that down, write a card, and sign it. And so at the end, I went through those cards when I was leaving and counted them all up. It was a little over 300. So that was a lot of reps of real violence.
Mm-hmm.
And, multiple opponents, guys trying to stab me with an ice pick, guys trying to bust a beer bottle on your head or hit you with a chair, or multiple opponents trying to kick you and stomp you on the ground. Guys wrapping, I live in Texas, so guys wrapping their belt around their hand and leaving that big belt buckle and trying to hit you in the head with that belt buckle, like a flail. So real consequences. And but so I think really, and then I got into Sayoc. So that kind of primed me for getting into Sayoc. I think if I'd have met Tuhon Sayoc, or if I'd have met somebody in the organization, I wouldn't have been ready for it any earlier than that. But that sense of reality and those real reps kind of got me primed for Sayoc. But I think most martial artists are where you're at. Most of them don't have a lot of reps of real violence, and they haven't walked through that and put that in a place where it's manageable. I think you would find, because you're training, I think that you would find that you're going to do just fine. You're going to do quite well. But you just gotta, because the training really does work. It really does. And a lot of people misinterpret adrenaline or the chemical cocktail we refer to as adrenaline as fear. So when something comes up and we're pushing up against somebody and there's some threat of violence and that doesn't really happen, well, during that, your body gets that big giant dump of chemicals, and then you walk away and you can barely talk. Your throat's tight and your hands are shaking and you got butterflies in your stomach. And people misinterpret that as fear. And they feel like, I should have just punched that guy, right? They get angry at themselves because they I should have just done it, right? They feel like they were afraid, but because they misinterpret that. But really, that's just adrenaline. Every fighter who gets in a ring feels that, Mm-hmm. Listen to Mike Tyson. I mean, he just did an interview with Joe Rogan and said, man, I was afraid all the time. That's why he fought so hard. That's why he trained so hard, because he was afraid of what could happen. And so I think there's a certain amount of, you kind of get used to it, but everybody still feels that chemical cocktail. And I've talked to tier 1 operators and asked them, hey man, you do this? He's like, every time, man, every time I hear it. But I do my routine. I do what I'm supposed to do. When I go through this little systems check, I remind myself that I'm ready to go and that I'm the man, and then I go do the job. And so there's a whole bunch of things in that little conversation there, but it's certainly not beyond anyone in the martial arts, as long as they do it in a way that's progressive and very specific in direction. Because you can't pressure test a wide variety of skills at once. That's too broad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I got this new technique I'm working on. I'm going to try it in sparring. Good luck with that, right? It'll never happen. Yeah, you can't box it. You can't boil it down enough to create that one tiny little circumstance in sparring that you need to be able to pull that off. So you were trying the whole time, which means you were probably looking for something and getting hammered by everything else because you're looking for a new thing, and that you never could get bottled down into that thing. So you never even got a rep to try it. So scenarios or situations are the same way. That's why we don't do scenarios, why we do situations. So boil it down so I know I'm going to get this or that.
Yeah.
And those are the two things I'm really trying to test.
Thank you for that information. Haven't been in a tremendous amount of fights, a few,
Yeah.
but I had a gentleman, and you just explained something to me that happened 30 years ago. And a gentleman ran up behind me over a girl. We were at a bar. He throws me up against the wall from behind, and he starts trying to soccer kick. And I
Yeah.
fell in a silat stance, kept my hands up, and he didn't get any kicks through. And
Right.
then somebody came through, broke it up, and I shot up, and immediately I was like, "Why'd you do that, man?" My voice shot up like several octaves or whatever, and I was just like, and I like to tell my students that story. Like they were like, "Have you ever used this?" Well, I've used some of it, you know what I mean, but it doesn't always look like I thought it would look, or in that case, sound at all. Because I shot up, and I was like still trying to figure out what just happened, and then immediately like, "Why did you do that, man?" And you should have seen the look on everybody's face in the bar. It was Queens, New York, and they were like, "I don't know what just happened." And I was like, Neither do I. You're gonna have to tell me." But I'm pretty sure I was really close to getting kicked in the face a lot. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, you explained
Which,
that.
I mean, getting kicked in the face is no fun, but you would have survived it, right? That,
Yeah.
that you could have managed that. You know, because that's one of the things, I mean, unless he had, some weapon on his boots, he had weaponized his footwear somehow. I try to explain to people, real violence is not getting out unscathed, right? Without getting hit, right?
Yes.
Imagine how good you'd have to be to get into a boxing ring and not get and win and not get punched,
Mm-mm.
right? Or a grappling match and win and not get, I guess, sweaty or
Smushed at the least.
squished. Yeah, squished or if we didn't have all the tape and all the geese, if we were doing it on the concrete without getting, road rash. It's
Yeah.
impossible. So you just have to raise your threshold of expectation of what you think is going to happen and be good with that. That's part of why we need to be in good shape and why we need to be durable, right? And durability is as much mental and emotional as it is physical.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things that I feel like why people come to the martial arts sometimes, like why they come and then why they stay. I like to listen at the very beginning, and there's sometimes a part of me that's like, I don't think that's why you're really here. Like, we're going to do the class anyway, and you're welcome to join, and we're going to get through this, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Most people, yeah, I don't think most people have thought it through as much as we have,
Hmm.
we see so many of them. I don't even bother asking them anymore. I ask them, hey, have you done martial arts before? And what'd you do? How long ago was that? That kind of thing. Because obviously, if you have some, sleeper in your class, you'd like to know, oh, this guy's done some stuff, you know. Um, and then I ask them, what makes you want to? We're talking about adults here.
Hmm.
What makes you want to start martial arts now? And generally, they'll come up with something, one of the basic generic things. Oh, I want to be able to defend myself, my family, or I want to lose a few pounds, or I've always wanted to, but never could. And I just take them for that because that's as far as they've got. And that's just once I get them in the thing, once I get them in the machine, the process will do it. Right.
Yeah.
So I just need to get them in there. I need to build a rapport with them so that they feel welcome, they feel comfortable and safe and like we really do actually care about them. And then the process will do it. The training will do what we needed to do, um, and we'll eventually get to whatever it is that they were the real reasons. We'll eventually get to those, but I'm not asking them. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not asking them, all that stuff on the first day. It'll come out. You'll do a little light sparring, a few months later, and they'll get emotional or they'll get excited or whatever. Kind of okay, just back off that a little bit, just touch it, kind of see some things. You watch how they interact with other people. You watch how hard they are on themselves in the testing performance, and you start to see and build up, and you kind of figure out, okay, these are why he's here. These are the things we need to work on for that guy. And, turns out there's not that many.
Yeah.
Um, and the system's really good at identifying those. And then if you're a good coach, you're paying attention. And if you have a good system, a good progression, the training itself will lead them through those things and help them overcome them.
How do you balance innovation with tradition in a curriculum? Just for you. I mean, just for you, sir.
That's a great question. I was just texting Guru Dan and about this exact same thing. And
Really?
yeah, yeah. And because innovation is something that I just intuitively do. I think I believe that if you're still doing the same techniques that your advanced students are doing, if you're an instructor and you're still doing the same techniques your advanced students are doing, and you're not doing it any better than you did when you were them, then you're still that rank, right? So
Yeah.
there has to be more than, like, what's your point of performance? How do you know you're good, right? So I spar okay with my peers. I know the drills when Guru Dan calls me up at a seminar, and I can perform the drills. And I mean, that's the equivalent of being a rock star. Guru calls me up. I knew what he wanted. I did it. It looked great. I did it hard and fast. Everybody cheers. I sit down. That's my point of performance. Like, okay.
The word
Um,
performance is really important that you put in there. Yes.
yeah. But that's really very intermediate level to advanced level student. That's not like, you should be able to take any drill in the system and be able to tell me what it's for, what it does, what kind of training scars does it create? In other words, when I do this drill, it also creates some bad habits. Well, how do I fix the bad habits that drill created? What drills fix the bad habit of that drill? And then I would be able to take that drill and just completely disassemble it and reassemble a completely new drill that does that same thing, right? Or recognize that, oh, this is that drill from Lacoste. This is that drill from Bahalana. This is that drill from Attilio Balintawak. And all three of those drills teach exactly the same thing. So I don't need to teach them all three. I'm just going to teach the one that I like the most, the one that fits me in my curriculum. So I'm going to teach that one. Otherwise, you're teaching, like if you're trying to teach a multicultural curriculum, which all of us under Guru Dan are, there's so much cross section that you're like, oh man, how am I teaching sectoring? Am I teaching hand sectoring from JKD, outside split, that stuff? Or am I teaching it from Harimau and the Harimau hands drills? Or am I teaching it from the Latihan Jurus from Bukti Negara or Sarat? Or am I teaching it from, Muay Thai in my long guard? Well, all of those are entry systems, and they all teach sector, right? So you can touch on them, but what's your curriculum really going to focus on? And of course, generally that boils down to the proficiency and skill set of the instructor. I teach this because this is what I'm best at.
Mm-hmm.
And my students become that. Like Sifu Bruce said, it's very difficult to protect your students from yourself, right? And that's kind of what he meant. So in innovation, I'm always looking for what's the next level. What's there? What's in this that I don't see? What's in this that no one else is grasping? I really analyze what everything in the curriculum is for. I don't let anything rest on time. Or I used to be the guy who was like, in the 90s, I was the guy who copied everything out of Guru's notebooks. I was the guy who could tell you that came from this system, this instructor, that instructor came from this place. And this is number 1 through 7, right?
Yes.
In those theories. I was that guy in the 90s. And I did that probably until mid 2000s. Mid 2000s, I was seeing Guru probably every other month. So for several years, I was seeing him in Stockton, California, and Los Angeles, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Dallas at my place, and in Sifu Fong's Academy in Georgia. So I was seeing him all the time. And so, you get to be kind of like Joel. You kind of know what's coming up because you saw him teach that here. This next series and all that stuff. So I did that for a while, but then I got pulled into working for DoD through Sayoc Tactical Group, and wasn't able to do that as often because I was working. And so then when I came back it with a different view than what I had done before. And so now I have guys in my organization that's what they do, but that's not my job. My job is the innovation part. My job is the depth part. It's still their job to know this is Mafalindo Series 2, number 3, right? But my job is to constantly analyze that and determine its value, its strengths, its weaknesses, how we're going to change that, how we're going to make that relevant today, and explore that, and make it more than. And that's what Guru Dan wants, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If let's just take something like my big push for the last 12 years has been Espada Daga. If I'm still doing the 7 Espada Daga captures, the Cebu series, if that's all I am doing after all these years, which I learned those in probably 91, if that's still all I'm doing, I haven't done anything. I'm just like Guru Dan says, guys who've been in martial arts for 20 years, they learned for the first 5 and they just regurgitated it 3 different times, right? They've been doing the same thing over and over again. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So you have to explore, you have to discover, you have to research, you have to test, and in that process is the innovation that I think that Guru Dan is constantly always talking to us about. So I get a little excited when we're talking about this particular subject because I see that that's rampant in martial arts in general, and I fight strongly to keep that from happening in my organization.
What I heard was there's a layer of memorization, right? And earlier we brought up the word, or you had brought up the word mimic. And there's a mimic and there's memorization. And then later the onion keeps getting peeled back, right? And through that, you see it through a different lens.
Yeah, the first stage, and it's one everybody confuses. And I hate talking about JKD because it's so political.
I absolutely hear you too, hon. I didn't. Yeah.
When I do interviews with Dwight, I'm like, listen, don't get me into the weeds on JKD politics, man.
Yep.
I don't want to talk. You do a great job. Keep doing that. Let's talk about training. But the beginning is accumulation. When you know nothing, you have to accumulate information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, you don't know enough to be able to determine good or bad at that time. So you're just accumulating everything. And it's not just techniques, it's training methods, it's drills and experiences, right? This is where we gain experiences, is in this accumulation phase. And then through gaining more experiences, we can determine useful, not useful, right? And well, this is kind of useful, but for me, I have to tweak it. Well, now we're really doing the whole thing, right? And so the curriculum, in my opinion, is always under scrutiny. Guru Dan constantly evolving his curriculum. I'm rewriting my whole adult curriculum right now. I do that about every 5 to 6 years, just like Guru. And so because you look at your students and if you're good, you're looking at your student base and going, okay, we're doing pretty good on this, but this right here needs some work. How can we evolve that, make that better? Like you're talking about that Panantukan. Our Panantukan looked a lot different then than it did when I was with Sifu Gibson, right? When I was with Terry, we weren't using it in focus mitts and stuff. We were just doing it on each other. But we were working on trying to hit the pads, hit the biceps, and tie elbow pads on so we wouldn't hurt each other. And of course that doesn't work. But then by the time I'm doing Panantukan videos, we're doing it on focus mitts, and now it looks completely different than it did then. So that's the constant study and evolution. And so in the beginning, you are accepting everything in and putting it on the table, and that's one of the things that Guru Dan's great at. And then as you're accumulating, you're gaining experiences, then you start doing all that. And then through your own experiences, you're able to say, this doesn't work. And even then you can't say, well, this doesn't work. You got to say, this doesn't work for me. And then, so you can't throw it out of your curriculum because it's going to work for you. So I got to still leave it in my curriculum because it's going to work for this type of body style or this type of emotional state. Like a straight blast works great for you if you are angry. It works great if you have that mental, like, oh, I'm going to crush this guy's head against the corner of that wall. That's great. But if you've been startled and they jump out and they startle you and you're like this, you're not straight blasting right then, right? Now, maybe afterwards if you get the right temperament. But if you're not one of the guys who gets startled and punches someone, if you're the guy who gets startled and takes a couple of steps back, straight blast isn't for you at that moment, right? So some people just don't have the temperament for that, right? As great as that material is that Vu decided to focus on, you have to have the right temperament and physicality to be able to do that. Other people do not have that. So if that's all our curriculum is based on, what happens to those people who don't have that temperament and that physicality? Mm-hmm. So that's why you have to look at your whole curriculum. This works great for me because I'm a 6'2", 250-pound white guy from Texas, and I can move some bodies. But for somebody else, a 5'5" Filipina, and she doesn't have that athleticism. She certainly doesn't have that. I mean, she's a caregiver for a living. She doesn't have that temperament. Well, that's not going to work for her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you got to be careful with the whole reject what is useless thing, because you have to take in consideration that this martial arts has to transcend time and space. So it had to work 100 years ago in the Philippines. It has to work 100 years from now, wherever my student is, right? And it has to work in the Philippines. It has to work in Texas. It has to work in Italy. It has to work in Africa. It has to work in Afghanistan. And so if I boil it down too much to just what works right here, right now, then we've cut so much off that it won't be viable when the thing changes, right? When the circumstance changes. So in some parts of the world, blade work is still everyday threat, every day. In other parts of the world, explosives are an everyday threat. In other parts of the world, being poisoned, right, is an everyday threat. Like intentional poisoning, not accidental poisoning.
Not food poisoning, no.
No, not just food poisoning, but like people intentionally trying to poison you and your family.
Yes, sir.
So, and those are things that people on this call might be like, what? That's not true. But because it's so far outside their world. And so the martial arts has to handle all of those potential threats. It has to be able to understand them, mitigate them, build defenses against them, and then build training methodologies that you can use to survive in those environments. So martial arts has to be much bigger than, well, I train for the ring and we do, BJJ, and we do submission tournaments, we do UFC, or we do Muay Thai or whatever, right? Well, you're necessarily going to have to boil that down to that's what you're teaching and that's what you're training and that's what your curriculum is, right? And so that means you're going to drop off some of this other stuff, right? It's an extremely skilled guy with a very broad curriculum that can train really high-level fighters and still address any of those other issues.
That's a great answer, Tuhon. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. I also know, and well, I found out through my rabbit hole that you work with folks that quite honestly save children.
Yeah.
Could you tell us just a little bit about that? I know that you've talked about a lot about that and on other podcasts.
Yeah.
That was something that
Yeah. Right before COVID broke out, are we allowed to say that term now?
we're allowed to say whatever you want to say on this
I'm allowed to do whatever I
podcast.
want. That's exactly right. So so right before that broke out, a friend of mine was talking to a missionary who was working in a third world country, one of the most poverty-stricken countries in the world. And part of his mission trip was helping people who were going into brothels and rescuing women and children from the slave trade.
Yes, sir.
And they also worked with children in forced labor camps. And you think, oh, well, that's much better, but not really. They die just as fast. I mean, they're killing children like they're throwing them away like empty water bottles, and on the same numbers. It's crazy. So anyway, he was here in the United States talking to my friend. I went up and met him. We had a conversation. He's like, "Here's the threats we're having." I'm like, I had just come off of working for Sayoc Tactical Group full time with doing stuff with the DoD. And was looking for like, what am I going to do now? And I was like, yeah, let's try that. So I talked to the Sayoc Council and about, should I do this? Is this a good thing? And how much can we show and how much can we help? And we all thought that was a good thing. So a good mission. So we ended up going over there and working with those guys for a couple of weeks. And, we got to see what it looked like and lived in that country for a couple of weeks and talked to people who are doing the rescuing, seeing the places, seeing the places where they take them for recovery and rehab and all the stuff, and really affected us. In fact, my wife was like, I took her because what you're doing is not allowed in their country, what we're doing there. And so you have to go as something besides that.
Yes,
or they won't let you in the country, right? And if they catch you, they put you in jail. It's a serious thing. So anyway, we were tourists and we did some tourism things. And but she saw the other side. She dealt with the victims and they were doing and that sort of stuff. And I did the training model, and they brought in people from all over the world to come in to train with me while I was there. And you know, it was heartbreaking, honestly. Um, Not just what the kids were going through, but heartbreaking to realize that these people are going into incredibly dangerous situations with zero training, nothing, nothing but a prayer. And I asked a guy, I said, well, what's your plan if somebody grabs you and the child you're trying to rescue? It's like, I would just curl up into a ball and hope they didn't kill me.
Oh my
And I
God.
was like, man, that's not a plan, my friend. So anyway, so I mean, how much can you work on in a couple of weeks? Well, fortunately, because of working with Sayoc Tactical, we built models on how to make people really good, really fast. And so we did that. And at the end of that, those guys were able to stand up for themselves and the innocent children they were trying to rescue. So we made really good impact. Um, my wife didn't want to come home. She's like, we got to stay here and do something here. And I was like, well, let's step back out of the emotion of it. And let's go home and sit down and lay out a logical plan, right? Let's don't get too caught here. And so that's what we did. And COVID broke out while we were there. And then we made it back home, and everything kind of shut down after that. And we decided, well, we couldn't travel, right? So we decided, well, we'll work with the locals, the local law enforcement and the state law enforcement here. So we started working with um, uh, the law enforcement here in Texas, you know, groups like the Texas Rangers and other entities, and started training those guys on some of the stuff that I had been teaching for the DoD, and so we formulated Operation Rescue Children, and which is that's what we do. We train law enforcement and NGOs, anybody who's dealing and fighting human slavery and human exploitation. We provide them free training for how to go do that, how to do it more safely, how to do it, how to recover from that, from what you see, because obviously they're seeing some pretty horrible stuff. And Sayoc has a great program for that mental side of things, or when I say the mental and emotional side of things. Um, and so we started doing that, and so that's gone really well. Now we have more teams. 2026 is going to be more teams than we've ever trained before. State and local guys, training more operators, more teams, which in turn leads to more effect down the range. You know, our goal is to be a force multiplier. I mean, I could put together a team and we could go to a third world country where we could probably get away with some stuff, but you can only rescue as many kids as you can kick in the door, right? But here, if I train a team and we help make them better at that, that will last. I can change the team culture, and that will last forever, right?
Yes.
And then everything they do is better because of something we did with them. And if we work with them, with some of these guys, we worked with 5 years now, and we've completely, you know, been accepted into that culture, and they in ours. And so we're making really great strides. They're having really great successes out there in the world. And of course, we don't believe in our organization. We don't believe in saying, well, we rescued 37 people or whatever last year, because we didn't do that, right? And what happens is some NGOs, they work with a department and they say that department rescued 15 people, so we rescued 15.
Mm.
We believe that's a form of stolen valor. So what we do is we say we work with this many people, this many departments, and then they were able to, you know, go out and do great work. And we don't track that because we're only a small piece in that pie, right? We're a small piece in that puzzle. But it's been a phenomenal thing. It's a terrible problem in our society, and it's a great big giant dragon that's worthy of spending the rest of my life slaying. So my wife and I are committed to doing that, and you know, we spend a great deal of time and effort, and we donate our own personal money to doing that. We donate our own personal time. We don't take a dime from it. All of it goes into training the operators and making things, providing them equipment and facilities to be able to do that. And it's good work, man. It's good work.
Thank you for doing it, Tuhon. That's amazing. Is there anywhere where people could donate some money to help out that type of thing there that we could talk
Yeah.
about now?
Yeah. Our website is standwithorc.org. And you can go on there and, we have education programs we're putting together for people that they can be able to take and download, and we'll send them information they can go teach it at their churches or their PTA. Do PTA still exist? They could
Probably.
teach. They could teach it in their groups in their communities. And then we have a training group that trains the operators, and then we have a prayer group, a prayer project, where we send out quarterly little prayer cards that has a prayer written by our partner, Dr. Keith Wagner, and it's specifically getting all the people that we can to pray a specific prayer for the people who are out there doing the job and for the people that they're helping. And so they can go to standwithorc.org and they can sign up for the prayer project. They can donate some money. People, you hate to talk about money, but if you're providing people with equipment and training and a facility, that's just a necessity, right? And the whole idea is provide them that training without them having to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start having to make decisions about whether we're going to send one guy or all five, right? Or whether we're going to do this or that, we only have so much money. Well, I can just eliminate all those barriers by saying, listen, all you got to do is schedule a date and show up. And all of a sudden, people are more capable of doing it, right? They're showing up more regularly, which means we're getting more impact. And you deal with some NGOs who just don't have the money to send someone before they go out of the country to, that kind of stuff. So and some departments are small, and they need to spend their budget on equipment. I was just talking to a company this last week, not a company, but a team, and they don't even have the bare equipment that I would expect for a team to have. Because they're going to come train with me, and I'm like, okay, what about this? What about that? Like, we don't have this, we don't have that, we can't do this. I'm like, oh, okay. So, small departments, are trying to decide whether gear or training, and so we're trying to help them out. They can go spend that money on gear, and we can provide the training. And if you're talking about that being your community, that makes a big difference, right?
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Tuhon. Would you like to come back and talk to us again? I have a whole list of questions I didn't ask because I find you fascinating and I enjoyed our conversation.
Sure. I mean, I'm always amazed that anybody wants to sit down and talk.
I'm not.
But yeah, I'd be happy. If your viewer base is interested, this is probably a little different than what most people are hearing. But yeah, if your viewer base is interested and you're interested, yeah, I'd be happy to come back.
Thank you for your time today, Tuhon Harley. God bless you. Enjoy your gathering and
Oh,
seeing everybody over the weekend. And give Coach Chuck a hug for me. And make sure you take an overhook. No, never mind. Okay. So this is Jamie Sparling from the FormABLE Podcast. Tuhon Harley Elmore. And donate some money to ORC. They're doing good work, and there's some people that need some help. So we'll have him back on the show, and I'll ask more questions at a later date. Thanks for watching the show. Subscribe, like, or not, but send them some money so they can continue to help children. Please and thank you. All right. Thank you for coming to spend time with us, Tuhon, and I will be in touch. I have a whole list. There's 2, and I asked 3 of 2 pages. So I will be in touch, sir.
all right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care, and just send them some money and try to help them out a little bit. And if not, then get the prayer cards because that's amazing. That's amazing. We'll see you next time for the FormABLE Podcast. Jamie Sparling, Affinity Martial Arts. Tuhon Harley Elmore of Warriors Way. We'll see you next time.